actually the only one which is a faith-based organization. So we have a very special status in the Commonwealth, which is wonderful. And I am a trustee of the board of the Commonwealth Jewish Council. It's a charity in its own right. There are 4 trustees, and what we're there to do is to help Jewish communities throughout the Commonwealth to enhance the Jewish life of their members, to live in safety and respect, and to help these communities in their efforts to contribute to the wider society in which they live. We have 4 regional hubs. We share decision-making with the communities in the Commonwealth Jewish Council, enabling them to connect and to network, to share understanding, resources, programs, and ideas, and to celebrate each community's unique and individual culture, because whilst we are very similar in so many ways, we also have wonderful differences to celebrate. We provide links between the communities. We have a network where we can share our interests and our worries. We also support the interests of those countries where people are living. And we make representations on behalf of Commonwealth Jewish communities to governments and other relevant bodies where needed. And about a couple of years ago, about 18 months ago, I guess, Robbie and I were talking. So Robbie is she basically runs the Commonwealth Jewish Council. And we were talking about the power in the women of the Commonwealth Jewish Council. Somebody needs to go on mute. Can somebody go on mute? And so as a result of that, we set up the Commonwealth Jewish Women's Network. And this is an event of that group. We are very, very privileged in having a steering group of women from all over the world involved in the Women's Network. And the Women's Network is divided into working groups now, because we felt that that was a way to actually get some tachlis done, get some action done, as opposed to just talking about things. And one of those working groups is the Women in Leadership group, because there was a lot of interest in thinking about leadership skills and leadership roles and what stands in the way of women in leadership and what's so special about women in leadership within the Jewish communities around the world. So this group has been the group driving today's event. And as you'll have noticed, we are going to have a session, first of all, with our wonderful guest speaker, Janét, who will be introduced to you in a few seconds by Debbie. And then we're going to split into breakout groups. And everybody, I think, has pre-assigned themselves a breakout group, but if you haven't, we'll assign you one. And we're going to go into the groups which already exist to hear what's going on in your own countries, to hear whether you might want to be involved with us, and to get our thinking moving forwards by having fresh blood and interesting women join us. So I'm going to now hand over, having sort of basically told you what the Commonwealth Jewish Network is about and the Women's Network. I'm going to hand over to Debbie Wasserman, who's on our steering group, who leads the group of women in Jewish leadership. I just want to say a huge thank you, Debbie. Debbie has worked extremely hard to pull today off. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. And I'm going to hand over to you now to introduce our guest speaker session. Thank you so much.
Good day, everybody. My name is Debbie Wasserman, and I am the president of National Council of Jewish Women of Canada. As an active member of the Commonwealth Jewish Women's Network, it's my great honor to be introducing our speaker today. The Women in Leadership Committee of the Commonwealth Jewish Women's Network has organized today's talk with Dr. Janét Aizenstros, a true example of a strong, successful female leader. Janét is a Canadian media proprietor, author, talk show host, speaker, model, producer, and globally recognized emotional intelligence advocate. A successful entrepreneur, Dr. Aizenstros is a very passionate and dedicated person committed to excellence. The founder and CEO of Ahava Group Global, a modern media parent company comprised of a number of digital and publishing businesses. She's an award-winning businesswoman, her company ranking the 12th on Canadian Business's 2020 growth list. making her the first Black Canadian woman sole founder to be featured in the top 20 on this list. The Commonwealth Jewish Women's Network has a wide range of people across the globe. No matter where we are, there are always challenges for women as leaders. Sometimes it's the challenge of competing with our male counterparts. Sometimes it's being recognized or taken seriously as a leader within our own communities. Sometimes it's having the opportunity to learn leadership skills. And sometimes it's encouraging our young women to come forward to become leaders. Our speaker today, Dr. Janét Aizenstros, is an inspiration to us all. She's become a woman of distinction through hard work, perseverance, and great skills, and also a wonderful personality that you'll soon see. By hearing her inspirational story, hopefully we will increase our confidence to become mentors and leaders within our own communities. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat and we'll try to address as many as we can. There will be time at the end. If people raise their hands, we'll try to answer those questions too. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Janét. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We're so happy that you are able to join us. And there's so many things I know you can talk about, but we'd really like to hear how you started. What was your beginning? You weren't always such a successful person. Where did you come from?
Well, I'm born and raised in Guelph, Ontario, a little town, or I don't want to call it a little town. It's not a town any longer, but it's about 90 minutes west of Toronto. And I grew up in, I'm first generation. My parents are from the Caribbean. My dad's from Aruba. My mom's from St. Vincent. And I grew up in a wonderful place. Like Guelph is a really great ecosystem, an example of what it means to be Canadian. In terms of there's diversity, there's entrepreneurship, there are people coming from all different walks of life, right? So it really gave birth to a lot of my creativity because I had the freedom to be me, right? I was unaware of what was the social dialogue around me, being one Black, being Jewish, because in that reality, it wasn't an issue, right? Or maybe I was oblivious to it. So I think growing up in that environment has definitely given me the ability to know that I can do all things, not even thinking that there's a potential barrier to being who I want to be.
So you grew up in Guelph,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where you started getting your confidence, and
Mm-hmm.
you did all kinds of things before you started your business, your entrepreneurial stuff. What kinds of things were you involved in that helped you on your journey?
That's definitely, that's funny. So so if I was to actually I'm thinking back, I was actually just sharing this story recently at another event that I don't share publicly, but initially I went to school. I wanted to go to school to become a singer. I had no intention of going into business. And I would say Hashem closed that door very quickly, not because I wasn't a great singer, it just was not, in fact, my path that I was supposed to take. So I ended up saying, okay, so I'm not going to school for singing. Where am I going to go to school? So I'm like, oh, music. I want to be in music. Music is a business. So let me go into business. So I went to school and I did business management. That was my specialty. I just went to a business college and decided to do that. I entered into, I worked for a major American bank. I worked in capital markets, and then eventually I went over into commercial banking in Canada, and then into retail banking. And then I was like, okay, I'm done with banking. I have no desire to work in banking. I'm like, Hashem, what are you trying to tell me? I despise, like, it's not that I despise anything around money, but I was just like, what is the lesson here around finance? Like, why do we have to keep having this conversation around finance? So anyway, I went from job to job to job, feeling like I was going nowhere. And then finally, maybe a few years later, so if I was going to say 3 to 4 probably within 5 years, I ended up at this little boutique advertising company that was owned by a couple, Jewish couple, in fact. And I ended up working there for quite some time, and I discovered, hey, I'm really good at this. I actually found a rhythm in my professional career where I was like, oh, I'm really, really good at this. And so I stayed there for a period of time, and then between that time, so I would say this is about 2004 to 2007, I ended up getting married, having a couple of kids, and then I did a total 360 where I entered into luxury retirement. I entered into luxury retirement because I was like, I need a gentler way of life for my children, myself, and just so I could be more accessible. And I think in that space is one where I learned to have high tea, but I also learned to love and care for people. So my mother actually, she was a healthcare worker for her entire career. Loved it, had no desire to evolve or in the position. She just loved serving seniors. And I will share with her, it was actually one of the greatest experiences of my life, working with that and helping this evolving population, enjoy enhance the quality of their life at that place and at that stage in their journey. Um, which which is interesting because when I started Ahava Digital in 2011, looking back, I could connect all the dots. I had to go through working in all these different avenues of finance, and there was a bunch of little jobs in between. I went to Canon, I worked for TD. I went to do customs at one point. I was doing advertising, management consulting. I thought all of this was going nowhere. And I think the beautiful part was by the time I got to 2011, and this is after I was a stay-at-home parent, for about 18 months because we moved back to my hometown because we were living north of the city, north of Toronto. And in 2011, when I started Ahava Digital, it kind of all started to make sense. Okay, so I went through all of that for this very moment. However, Ahava Digital was not the vision. It was actually called something else. But I understood that I had developed these skill sets to become an entrepreneur. And so one of the things that I share with women is don't ever negate the process, is because in the process is where you get to see Hashem's guidance, where he's guiding you, where he's leading you, where he's taking you on this journey. And a lot of times we try to go from the beginning immediately to the end when we're given a vision, but it doesn't work that way. A part of it is establishing the fortitude, right? It's establishing the fortitude so that way you can actually uphold the success and the beautiful parts of your journey.
You're
the
so
memories
young.
and moments.
Janét, you're so young and you've done so many things. It's pretty incredible.
Well, I'm not as young as people think. I'm 42. I'm 42. Well, I'm still young. I'm young, but I'm not as young as many people think. I'm like a child. I am definitely I've been around the block. I've definitely had a lot of life packed into 42 years.
So through your work,
mm-hmm.
Do you help people become leaders? Do you motivate them to become leaders? How do you mentor them?
Oh, that's my favorite part. That is in fact my favorite part of my work, is building leaders. I would say 65% of my organization is in fact women in different forms of leadership. Delegation is key. When I started Ahava Digital, when I started the company in 2011, it was all about circumstances. Can I build a virtual company at home so I can be a mother to my children and still be accessible to my husband and still, be present for the needs that come with being a woman, right? And back then, there was a lot of men that laughed at me because they're like, oh, that's not a real business. And I was even told probably up in still to 2018, you need to get commercial space. You need to do this, you need to do that, because that's really not a business. Well, a few years back, I came across this company called GitHub. And many people, they're a major a unicorn tech company. And GitHub actually started virtually as well. And GitHub substantiated our model for this virtual or remote type of working. Many people in tech already worked remote, but they substantiated it while COVID validated my business model. And those same men that were telling me that, oh, well, that's not really a business, you need to formalize it and have commercial space, were the same people that were circling back to me during COVID. How do we adapt for remote working? Right. So I think a lot of times you have to go with your gut also as women, and stand your ground on certain parts. I did not want to compromise being a mom. That's a really important thing for me. And it's humorous because in my journey, when I go back to my 20s, I didn't ever want to be a mother. But I think it was just, it's one of these things in the process that it came to me. And I embraced it. And I discovered, oh, I was really good at this. You know, I was sharing with my mom a couple of days ago, you know, if things had been a little bit different, I maybe have had 3 more. She's like, you would want 3 more children? I said, yeah, 3 more kids.
Wow, you do it all. It's great. Now, you see, you're speaking to a very diverse group of women. For some of us, in some of the countries, it's quite easy for women to establish themselves. But in some of the other countries, it's more difficult, whether it's because the male influence is so much stronger, or there's not the same tools to become a leader. What kind of advice could you give these women to help?
You know, it's difficult because exactly what you shared. In certain countries, women they just don't have access to things, or their voices are not heard and silenced. And it's really unfortunate. I think the one big piece that when I speak to women, especially women that I've seen come from different countries, I've traveled to so many places globally, and throughout certain regions of the world where women feel like they don't have a voice, I think it's really important that women that do have a voice advocate for these women at the table, right? And that's not just by empowering them and inspiring them, but advocating for them socially and politically as well. We're not going to see change. They may not be able to change inside of their own countries, but there's definitely women. I think we're at a point in history where women really need to band together and advocate for those that don't have a voice, and then come up with strategies on how we can, in fact, transform that. We're seeing parts of that happening in certain parts of the Middle East region where women are getting slightly more opportunities of advancement. And I say slightly being the operative, right? But a lot of this has to do with patriarchy, and I think that a lot of women need to realize we need to transform parts of the conversation within us collectively as women too, because meanwhile patriarchy exists, there's still sects of women that uphold patriarchy at all age ranges, right? I think a lot of time women that are coming from more evolved in their journey get hit with, well, it has to do with the woman that we're coming from here. No, there is still younger women that uphold patriarchy, and a lot of that has to do with they didn't have a strong male figure, they didn't have X, Y, and Z in their life, so they seek validation from these figures, which then kind of undermines the traction that some of us are attempting to make, right? So I think collectively as women, it's transforming the conversation within and advocating for those that don't have a voice on a political and a social level. And that's really important, because as much as I would say, well, what would be the advice that I would give to a woman living in certain dialogues? There's an advisor that works for me, and she's actually from Iran, and she talks about how beautiful she thinks Iran as a country, as the people are, but unfortunately she also talks about the real truths and realities of what the Ayatollah has done in that particular region. Now I know obviously we're not going to get political here, and I will share this with you, Debbie. I am comfortable having that conversation as well. But what I will share outrightly is that we have to advocate for women at the table, and especially women in positions of influence.
What kind of advice could you give to all of us how to reach our leadership potential? What motivates people to get there, to have the confidence to reach it?
Belief, and don't expect for someone to give you permission to be you. I think a lot of times for women, they're looking for someone to give them permission to lean in. So when we think about Sheryl Sandberg's book, right, she talks about leaning in. But if anybody's seen my recent quote from the Globe and Mail article I did at the beginning of January, mid-January, it talks about successful women are not asking permission. We don't ask permission, we take it because we know that's our birthright. We take it because we know that we were called to be the head and not the tail, right? And so when you understand that premise and you understand these basic philosophies, and I think initially, Debbie, when you sent me kind of the outline for this, one of the things that you talked about is how has my Jewish belief system influenced my success. And that's that very scripture that I just quote, that quote that I just said, we're called to be the head and not the tail, is the same thing that God said to us, right? This is a part of where some of the promises that he's given to the Jewish people is the fact that we are called to be great. We are salt and light of the earth. And we are here to obviously bring forth a tikkun olam. And so if we diminish our light, then when light is diminished, what is overtaking it? Darkness. The whole purpose is that even though that our people may be small remnant, it is the fact that we have left such an imprint and an impact on the world because of the foundational principles that we've had from our formative years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. You're a parent, you're a mother. Mm-hmm. How do you instill this confidence, this desire to be the best person you can be in your own children?
I give my kids the space to be them, right? Without putting expectations on them. You know, I am the person that I became because my mother, interestingly, my mother, in her words, she would say she wasn't necessarily given the tools to be the effective role model that she felt she wanted to be. But I've had to tell her that she was doing exactly what was necessary for me to become the person I needed to be. Okay. And so in terms of role modeling, my mother gave me the freedom to be me. I wasn't a person that was, my mother didn't helicopter parent us, you know, she gave us the freedom to roam, whether that be in nature, whether that with content and with books, right? She helped us, she gave us the freedom, whether it could have just been little things, like she wasn't standing over us like in every intricate detail of our lives. And I think that's one of the unfortunate realities now when I see parenting is like, we're trying to keep our children in a box. I don't want my kids in a box. I want my kids to have the freedom to roam. They know that there are boundaries within how they roam, but and it's upholding that. But one of the things that I've really instilled in my kids is I want them to have the freedom to be themselves, a healthy foundation of who they are in terms of Black and Jewish culture, and the intertwining of that. I've also, I don't hide things from them as well. And I think that's a reality that we have to prepare. We're raising adults. Friend Julie Cole is the one that taught me that we are raising adults. We're not raising children. If we want our men and our women to grow up to be men and women that are not codependent on us, we have to teach them independence and give them this sense of interdependency in their childhood so that way they can grow up to be effective and efficient adults.
You must have a lot of people that are giving you challenges through your journey, like wanting to take over, wanting to, or not respecting what you are, who you are. How do you deal with those kind of people?
Do you know what? Something. A lot of times people ask me that, and they assume that it's men that give me the challenges. It's actually not men that give me the challenges. It's women most of the time that give the challenge to me. And I think it's socially because women have been placed in competition against each other. You'd be very surprised that I almost never get pushback from men. Men respect my position. They respect what I've accomplished. They they can see me. And there's definitely, of course, there's definitely women in my network that do appreciate me as well. But how I usually deal with conflict is I don't engage conflict. I'm a solution-based person. Also, I ascertain a situation based upon the person I'm having a conversation with. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not or cannot be confrontational, but confrontational does not mean I'm showing up with the spirit to diminish. You approach that with humility and vulnerability, and you take the onus. A lot of times, people are more responsive to empathy when you actually talk about your own vulnerabilities instead of pointing the finger and charge at them. And then when you're looking at the person too, you also have to know, is this person even going to be receptive to the message, right? There are some times to be, there's times to be silent, and there's times to speak. And so it's just gauging whether or not this is a battle to fight or to even be vocal. Now, it doesn't mean even though I'm a businesswoman, I have had to tango a few times with some people that did in fact overstep my boundaries. And unfortunately, they got their head ripped off in the process. So, and I won't deny that. I won't deny that. And I think that's just being honest, right? Like there are going to be people that overstep your boundaries. And as sweet and care bearish as I look, I can tango with the best of them. I can.
I think we're going to open up and see if some of the audience wants to ask some questions. If you have a question, you can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, I'm going to change my screen so I can see. I can't see everybody, so I'm going to see. Oh.
Yeah. Do we have a question from our audience?
Laura Marks, I know you.
I wanted to ask you, Janét, thank you so much so far. I wanted to ask you about your Jewish journey. And, clearly your Judaism plays a major role in your life, the way you talk, but I'm interested in, were you always like that? Did you sort of discover did you strengthen your Jewish identity along the way? What was your Jewish journey? I think would be really interesting into how it fitted into your success.
I will share this. I wasn't, and I had actually just had this conversation with Debbie. I wasn't raised Jewish. I think for many displaced Black men and women, or children of displaced Africans, are always left with this question of where did I come from? Where's my origin? Like, who were the tribes of people that we came from? And I know that I wasn't raised Christian. I wasn't raised Jewish. I was sent to church, but this is the interesting piece. The interesting part of this journey is that even though that you can remove a people from where they came from, a lot of times, unless you break that person, you can't necessarily destroy some of the cultural customs that people preserve. And the interesting thing is that every time, as I was a child, we'd always have Friday night dinner. And I never understood this, why we were having Friday night dinner. And you've probably heard other Jewish people share this as well. Like, we did certain things when we were kids and I never understood why. And only for them to discover through another family member that they were in fact Jewish. So my awakening, Laura, actually came when I was sharing with Debbie, I was living as a devout Christian. Okay, so here I was, a Jewish girl that didn't know she was Jewish, living as a devout Christian. And the entire time I was living as a Christian, I was like, why can't I pray to Jesus? And I didn't share this with Debbie, but I was like, why can't I do this? And the funny part is I kept praying and I was like, God, please send me a man that will love me the way that I desire to be loved. I didn't get a Christian guy. I ended up marrying a Jewish man. Right. So the Jewish man was the first man that I married, that I was the only place that I could ever feel interconnected. And the humorous part as the story goes on, I always share with people that I had very different dynamics when dealing with religion. I had a wonderful experience with Christianity, an unfortunate, like when I first came to Judaism, because it was a foreign culture and a dynamic to me. But I always tell people in the end, Judaism healed me, because it revealed a lot of truths that had kind of left me conflicted in my own soul. And so as the journey goes on, And when I started aligning with my Judaism was around the time I started to have a digital, which unfortunately was at the end of my former marriage. And the interesting part, it came out of a conversation actually with a woman, an Israeli woman. Her and I had become friends, and she was talking about doing genetic testing. And she's like, specifically what she did, without mentioning the company, she was actually, she works for an Israeli organization that actually does the genetic testing for Jews looking to find out about their ancestry and looking for certain DNA markers. So I decided to do this, and we were making a joke. And the initial joke was, Laura, was she's like, your grandmother's name is Esther. Your name is, my actual full name is Janét Aizenstros. So we're making jokes around stereotypes, right? Like my brother's names are Sheldon and Sherman, which are Jewish names, right? And so we're all having this, big laugh. So anyway, I end up doing the test, and then I find out that I have certain DNA markers that in fact linked to Jewish ancestry. And I said, this totally makes sense. The other part was when I married my former Jewish husband, his family was Orthodox. So I was already living Jewish. So in order to formalize the process, because obviously I had not formalized my Jewishness because I didn't grow up that way, I actually did go back and could do the proper conversion with a rabbi and get mikvah. And I did that with me and my children. And it's such an interesting journey when you're asking about how has this lent to my journey. Hashem was always with me, right? And I think this is the part too, for many of us that have this sense of, I will say, our clairsentience or clairvoyancy in our own personal journey. We know, we can feel the presence of Hashem. And I felt that since I was a young child. So I felt like I was always guided by something that was greater, whether that be our ancestors that were always on looking, but I was guided by something that was greater. And so exactly, and it's very true in Jewish culture where we say our neshama will call us back, right? When it's time. And I felt like when I met my Jewish husband, that was God calling me back. That was him definitely calling me back. And it has actually been the foundation, the same principles that I did learn. So regardless of how I grew up, a lot of the foundational principles that I learned around discipline, integrity, I felt, even though when I first met my Jewish husband, I may not have had this wonderful integration into the Jewish community. What was beautiful about that, I felt at home within the Jewish community because it wasn't about what we looked like. It was about the mindset and the values that we upheld. And that was what was very similar. So I hope that answers your question, Laura.
Good. Do we have another question?
Okay.
Just chime in if you have one.
You talked a lot about your mother, but you didn't mention your father very much. What role did he play?
Yeah, my dad, I'm a daddy's girl. My dad is wonderful, very quiet, stoic man. As you get to know him, he's quite jovial. I would say that my dad actually gave me the foundation, I think, and I see this probably more in my personal life. I get along really well with men because I think my dad was my first best friend. I get along great with women, of course, but I get along with men, and so I understand how to establish camaraderie with men because I had that healthy foundation. And even when I've had adversity with them, I know how to kind of navigate through those situations with ease. So my dad was really helpful in laying that foundation and creating a sense of comfort in engaging men, and which has led to my professional life too, and walking into situations that with comfort and ease as well, because I know where to kind of meet them.
We have a question about what's your company actually does? If you can-
Yes, and thank you. I love that question. So I will share with us. So what Ahava Digital does is that we work with Fortune companies as well as major media companies to help them connect with women consumers in an emotional and intuitive way using data and technology. And a lot of people ask us, well, what does that look like? So initially it started off with us gathering or using a proprietary technology where we would gather or help companies gather data on their ideal clientele to utilize for targeted direct marketing. We've actually transitioned more into less on the marketing and advertising side and more on the data and technology side by now licensing out the technology and becoming a distributor for verified data.
Good. Have you experienced anti-Semitism in your work?
Yes, that is a wonderful question. I will share this transparently. I have faced more anti-Semitism than I've ever faced racism.
Really?
Yes, I've faced more anti-Semitism and ever faced racism. And unfortunately, a lot of this has to do with ignorance. It has to do with ignorance around Jewish people, Jewish culture, only identifying Jewish people as being Ashkenaz, not seeing that there's different, knowing that there are different phenotypes and different cultures of Jewish people. And so unfortunately, being a Black woman and being Jewish has at times left me in places of division, not conflicted within myself, but left me in places of division because a lot of the dynamics that I have faced were in fact by other Black men and women who tried to diminish my Jewishness based upon only focusing on racial identity, right? And not understanding the history of what happened with Jews. And also what many people don't know is that Judaism actually went through a political racialization because of anti-Semitism, right? They don't understand that it wasn't, they don't understand that Jews are in fact a race, a group, a people, and a culture. One is not removed from the other. We're not just a religion.
Right. How do you think the pandemic has affected the world of women? What effect is happening?
I think it's helped women become organized. I think that women have become organized in a way, positively, by the way. We were always organized, but I think we've become organized in a way where we're actually starting to see traction. I think that when we see some of the things that have happened with Sarah Blakely or Whitney Wolfe Herd, myself, or Canadian entrepreneur Joanna Griffiths, right? You're starting to see more women are coming to the forefront and being examples and role models for other women. We're also seeing a lot of women starting e-commerce businesses, which is really exciting. It's really exciting because I think they're coming up with creative ways in order to do that. So I've actually seen more positive, or maybe it's because I'm an eternal optimist. I choose to look at the highlighted benefits of the things that women are doing.
What do you see as the strengths of Jewish women?
What I see the strengths of Jewish women, I would share Jewish women are really resilient. And I think that very much comes from knowing our history, knowing that, regardless of how many times they've tried to crush us, diminish us, we're still here. We're still rising, right? And I think if anything last year with the conflict that did take place in Israel was a depiction of that for sure. I saw a great question come in. Was a depiction of that for sure, because I think that Jewish people we're becoming vocal. We're not just sitting down. I think just because of things that have happened to us throughout history, it's not to say that we weren't vocal, but we were almost shying away from conflict because we had been villainized we've been victimized and villainized for so long, but now we're actually becoming vocal, and we're seeing a lot of that with the younger generation of Jews who are now saying, no, I'm Jewish and I'm proud, right? Other groups have been doing that. As a Black woman, we've been saying that in the Black community for quite some time, but it's really exciting to see Jewish people doing it as well. For us, and I think the one part that I do try to very much drive home when I do talk to Jewish men and women, especially those that may not be as integrated within Jewish culture, is that sometimes it can leave them conflicted with their Jewish identity because they don't know. They don't, like, it wasn't passed on to them. And I tell them, when you understand the impact that Jewish people have made on the earth in almost every sector, the world cannot be without us. So at the end of the day, people can, they don't have to like us or our politics or how we show up in the world, but there's one thing they can't ever take away is the legacy that we, and the imprint that, and the impact that we have left on the world. There's not a place that a Jewish hand has not, in fact, touched in any sector of business, healthcare, and all of that. And I say that very proudly and pridefully. Obviously, you can tell by my stance. I say that very proudly.
I think we can go on forever. We're going to deal with one more question because I know you have another engagement.
No, actually, I'm fine. If you guys still want to ask questions, I'm fine. I'll let you know when. Oh, yep.
Okay. How do you protect your personal preferences? Know that our online data habits is globally accessible. Mm-hmm. So how do you do that?
And define personal preferences.
Well, Rochelle, who asked the question, why don't you do that?
Yeah, I just want her to define that so that way I know which direction to go.
Rochelle, are you on?
There's another great question too, because is there a Jewish lens for the ethics of data sharing? And I'm wondering if Rochelle was sharing that as well.
Yes, she was.
Okay, so I'll answer that question, and then if Rochelle can jump on and clarify the first part. So what I did is that through Ahava Digital, I actually acquired a data center. And in that data center, obviously the conversation around data has been a really touchy topic of conversation. And a big part of that had to do with the repeal of the ISP or Internet Privacy Act that gave ISP providers the ability to allow major companies to gather information or share the information of the consumer. So with that being said, that we could not change, but what we did do is develop a proprietary methodology of how we made the data, how we verified the data ethically. And a big part of that had to do with involving the consumer in the process. So I'm going to share this with you. Consumers need to be involved in the process, knowing that it's their power of choice in the information that is in fact given. Right, we saw that with California law where there was opt-out laws, opt-out laws as well, and there's opt-in options. So it's really important that we understand that in order for data to be ethical, the consumer needs to be involved and has to be the one disclosing. We do not involve ourselves in scraping data, and obviously you saw one of our competitors going back to 2017 who got caught up, a very well-known company that I will not mention, but they got caught up in a lot of legal and political dynamics because of them attempting to gather information through AI technology, which in fact was an inadvertent way of them breaching information. I'm not going to reveal how they attempted to mitigate that because there's something on this particular company's platform that they called something that was encrypted. Well, it's encrypted, but you also have to disclose to people why they're moving from one space into another space, right? Mm-hmm. And so to be ethical, that means that the consumer needs to be involved. So that answers that place. And then how do you protect your personal preferences? Maybe I think she's asking about herself. I thought she was asking for me to know that our online data habits are good, is globally accessible. So I think I did answer parts of that. Ensure that when you're opting into something that, now I'll give a little bit of background. Technically, you want to look at who their partners and their affiliates are with organizations, but all organizations don't necessarily disclose that information, right? If you are going to opt into something, whether you're doing it, allowing cookies to track you, just know that your data will in fact be shared. Now I will share this. There is already data profiles on all of us. It's just a matter of, depending on where you live in the world, has to do more with the country's regulation around data.
Do we have another question?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to ask, I was just typing it out, but I might as well just say it. For a lot of people who are mature women who want to get into the digital business, that, you know, you go online and have their business online and they haven't got a clue on how to do it. Where do you start? You know, it's like a whole minefield. And, you know, I mean, a lot of us weren't raised with computers. A lot of us weren't raised with technology and with, you know, it's like we had to sort of just like hop along, Cassidy here, and just get there. And I think it holds women back who want to go forward, you know, as business people and to succeed. And I think it's so important. And I think that's what's a lot of that holds women back now.
Yeah. Is it Rosalie? I just want to
Yes.
make sure. Yeah. So Rosalie, thank you for that question. A great question. And a few years ago, now I can't speak for the other parts of the world, but I know in the Jewish communities here in Canada, we have different community centers in different parts, like around Toronto, there's a multitude of different community centers, and there's things that I was unaware of that existed in the Jewish Community Center, which were in fact programs that catered to people that wanted to, or they're either free programs or they're nominal cost programs that cater to people that want to actually develop certain skill sets. And Debbie, what is the name of the community center that's at Bathurst? The Joseph Wolf Lubovic Center, that's it. That's the center. Yeah, yes. I need to know that center for a multitude of reasons. But yeah, so the Joseph Wolf Lubovic Center. And it's actually these Jewish community centers are actually funded and fueled by, I believe, the UJA, that nonprofit, as well as and the UJA is a global organization, but start looking within our own communities for startups to gain some of these basic skill sets of learning how to use the computer, navigate around the computer, and then also integrating ourselves into courses. And what you don't know, I will share this, no business person does anything alone. I can tell you this right now. In the beginning of my company, I taught myself how to code. I didn't need to teach myself how to code. I could have found somebody that could have do the coding for me. I don't need to learn how to do a website. What I do need to do is to find the right people in order to do that. Now, I had to code because I didn't have the financial resources to hire somebody. But if you do, you can always find somebody, hire somebody to do the things that you're not good at. But basic computer skills are something that people should in fact have.
I think people have the basic skills. I mean, I think everybody here knows how to get on Zoom, knows how to use a computer. That's not what I meant. I meant more advanced, more like if you want to start a business online, you got to really, you know.
How do you start a business online? So there is definitely workshops, and also through these Jewish community centers, there's definitely workshops where they can guide you. I know that the reason why I bring up the Joseph Wolf Lubovic Center is because I know that their upstairs had a digital center that was there for the youth, but they've also expanded. They expanded their offering, and some of the courses that they had outlined were like Ecom 101. But even if, let's say for right now, you can't necessarily go into centers in a certain way, there's platforms like Udemy where you can sign up and learn online from your computer at home, like just like how we're here on Zoom, from video content, YouTube, right? And their nominal prices on, not on YouTube, YouTube's free, but like on Udemy, you can find courses anywhere between $5 all the way up to maybe $100.
Can you spell that for me?
Udemy spelled UDEMY.com.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we have to wrap up, although we could go on forever, but this has been wonderful. I want to thank Janét for your candid discussion with us. To know you is to love you. You really, the more I speak with you, the more I want to be with you. You really have this magnetic personality, which is wonderful. And you're truly an inspiration to all women. Thank you for sharing your great insights, your personal stories. And I hope the strategies you've shared with us will motivate us all to get over our fear or inhibitions and actually achieve our true leadership potentials. Janét, if people want to find out more about you, how do they do that? If you can just...
They can do LinkedIn, LinkedIn or my website, because my other social media, I'm transitioning that right now. But they can definitely find me at LinkedIn or my website at JanétAizenstros.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you all so much for having me. It was such a wonderful time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. And now Laura, take over.
So thank you so much. Let me just add my thank you, Janét, as I know you've got a busy day and are leaving us. So, but we really appreciated having you here, giving your time. And we look forward to staying in touch with you with our Jewish Women's Network. We would be really honored if you'd stay close with us. So thank you.
Absolutely. I would love to come back and speak another time.
Thank you. Come and visit us in London, Canada, wherever we are.
Jersey. Go for high tea. You have
India.
That's a requirement. If I come to the UK, I have to go for high tea.
Definitely. We're on. Lots of cream.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, ladies. So we have a half an hour left. And what we're going to do is we are going to break up into groups. I think most people have pre-assigned themselves to a group. And we're just going to spend about 20 minutes just chatting in the group. So as I said at the beginning, the Commonwealth Jewish Women's Network has already divided itself into groups along different interest lines, which have been, I think you've chosen which ones you want to do. So we've got one on interfaith, social action, women in leadership. We've got, my brain goes completely blank here, but we've, everyone's signed up already for the ones they want to do anyway. So, and what we're going to do is we're going to go into these groups. Each group is going to be led by one of the women who's already in that group. We're going to tell you a tiny bit about what we're doing in that group and hear your experiences from your own communities. So one of the leaders of one of the groups is asking what she's doing. So I will tell you all. We are all going to talk about what's going on in that group, find out what people's experiences are and their interest in that topic. And we won't have very much time, but then really we want to see whether you'd like to stay engaged with us, whether you'd like to join that group and help drive the way. So it's lovely to have a network and it's great to meet each other, but we felt that for the network to be really powerful and really female, actually, is we would have some tachlis, we would do something. It doesn't mean to say that we're going out to plant trees or whatever it is, but we're going to, by doing something, we're going to focus on some of the major issues of today, whether they be social justice or education of Jewish children, or there are these 7 groups that exist. And so join us, come and hear what we're up to, come and talk for 20 minutes, and then we'll come back at the end, just wrap up and then be done certainly by 4:30. So if you can give us another 20 minutes of your time, that would be brilliant. I think that now, Robbie, we will automatically fly away into our groups. Is that right, Robbie?
Yeah, I've just opened up the room. So if you just click join, and any problems in your group, just leave and come back to the main room and we can move you around.
Mine disappeared before I had time to join.
Laura, don't join this one yet. So I'm just going to move you back.
Okay.
Bye, Janét. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you as well. So everybody else has left. I just wanted to say,
let me just stop the recording.